This podcast is not a replacement for therapy. All conversations, guests, tips, recommendations, etc. that are discussed are provided as educational, thought-provoking, inspirational insights, and not specific professional therapeutic or psychiatric advice. Our views expressed are our own personal experiences, insights, and perspectives. Information heard here is to be used at your own caution and discretion. As always, please seek out your own mental and medical health care to best serve you.
Hello, and welcome to another super awesome podcast. Today we are talking about family estrangement. And I'm going to just start off by saying that my cousin came to me with this topic, and I was like, what? What's that? What is that? And so I looked it up and I was like, and I'm thinking like, I should definitely know what this is because I've been a therapist for over 20 something years. I'm not even going to tell her that I don't know what she's talking about. So I Googled it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know what this is, but I've never heard it termed that way. And I was like, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who understand and know what this is, but have never actually heard it termed as family estrangement. And so today we're going to kind of give you an understanding of what that is, and kind of delve into the reasons why some people experience some family estrangement. I will say this, speaking in kind of lay terms, basically what family estrangement is, distancing yourself, or removing like some type of communication with a family member. And, honestly, a lot of people experience this, but not a lot of people talk about it because there's this huge stigma around, family estrangement, like distancing yourself from family, not talking to family, because you hear these terms like, blood is thicker than water, or that's family. So you got to stick by family. And it's like, because it's their blood or because of, cultural issues, whatever it is, you think, oh, well, no matter what they do, no matter what they say, I still got to stick by them because that's family. And that's never okay, right? Just because someone is family, just because they're blood, doesn't necessarily mean that we need to keep them in our lives if they're toxic, if they're, trampling all over our boundaries, if they're making our life miserable. So some of the ways in which, we found that people choose family estrangement, or they choose to distance themselves from family, include like having parents who are narcissistic, or have like borderline personality traits, any type of abuse, sometimes just a failure to acknowledge that they've hurt you, emotional abandonment, substance abuse, not accepting your sexual identity, difference in values, etc. One thing that I've found just in my personal life too is that family estrangement can be like on a spectrum. You can maybe distance yourself or, just not communicate with someone for a short period of time, for a long period of time, or even, forever. You may just decide, okay, I'm just not going to talk to this person ever again because I've given them plenty of chances. I see they're not going to change. and I need to move forward in my life. I know for you personally, like I didn't speak to my father for about maybe a little over 10 years. And I made that decision for myself. And also, I felt like at the time for my kids, I felt like I was protecting them. I felt like I was protecting myself. And maybe about a few years ago, we reconciled. And it wasn't that, my father just became this totally different person. It's that I became a bit different in my expectations. Like, first of all, I took them completely off the table. And then also, like, learning how to accept him for who he is and where he's at, and then learning how to kind of like maneuver through my own emotions in the relationship so I can make sure I'm unscathed, so just learning how to put boundaries on the limit of conversations, what the conversations go into, things like that, so that I knew that I could be able to manage and be okay in the relationship. But at the end of the day, like family estrangement, no matter who it is, no matter the length of time, it's not an easy thing to experience. And sometimes you end up just feeling really alone in it, especially again with the stigma of like, a family, you stick by family. And when you don't, people judge you, people have things to say about it. So, Jennifer's going to talk more in depth about this. But yeah, that's basically where I am. Jennifer?
No, I think we can wrap it up here because with all of your spoilers, you talked about your own personal example. You've already summed it up in 5 minutes. You've summed it up in 5 minutes. You talked about a personal example. You defined what family estrangement was. You identified feelings of isolation and loneliness. And then you gave away to the whole audience 4 tips about how you can deal with reconciliation. And the range and the spectrum. Dude, this is the shortest, most successful podcast we've ever done. Congratulations. Sorry for wasting your time, everyone. This has exceeded my expectation.
She's like, that is all. Good night. That is her podcast.
I almost wanted to interrupt you and say, spoiler alert, what are you talking about? No, seriously. All of that. You've covered so much. I don't even need to go into that. I don't need to go into the definition because it is a range, like you said, in all seriousness. Sometimes there's been this very clinical sense of cutting off all communication, but sometimes it's just limiting communication. And it has seemed like this has been pretty ignored as far as estrangement. There hasn't really been a large-scale study of this until recently. And it was a national survey that I guess was launched by a Cornell professor. And he recently published the results. But moving away from clinical studies, just looking all around social media and celebrities, whether it's Angelina Jolie or you see her difficult relationship with her dad, or let's be even more recent, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Here you're seeing play out this huge family separation, which kind of checks the boxes of moving yourself physically far away from this family that seems a little enmeshed, and all of the things that are coming out from that. And it's difficult to watch, but everybody has their opinion on that as well. But it seems like it's been common. I'm seeing it play out on social media. I'm seeing all of these things on Instagram about setting boundaries with family members and looking at toxic relationships. And yeah, it seems like there is, what probably caught my eye was an article a few months ago about how family estrangement is changing. And there's kind of a generational shift of what is the purpose of a family. Before, it's kind of seen as like this mutual bond where you are showing duty and obligation to take care of your family. And now these up and coming generations, including myself, look at a family as a launch pad for personal fulfillment. And so, this probably has long lasting effects, whether it's with divorce or parent child relationships. But yeah, it's interesting to see. Based on a recent study, it was 27% of Americans 18 years and older had cut off contact with a family member at some point, or either extended or still are estranged. So we could, instead of calling this family estrangement, we could say we don't talk no more.
Exactly. I don't deal with that fool.
And also with social media. Oh, and I'm completely forgetting that since the pandemic and in the US, there was this huge political shift where with President 45, Mr. Donald Trump, there were like these dividing lines on social media. Did you see that? Where it's like, I'm not going to talk, like conservatives and progressives were talking about, how am I going to deal with my family members during the holidays? I can't talk to them anymore because they're this, they're that. We just can't get along. So maybe that was unique to California, but I was seeing a lot, or hearing of a lot of people trying to cope with, how are we going to gather for the holidays when my family members have pretty offensive ideas, or we just don't see eye to eye.
Yeah, I think that brings up another point of like, just in our personal lives, when we have some, family estrangement, or I don't talk to that person no more. Like when we have family gatherings, oh gosh, that makes for a very awkward situation, because it's like, should I go? Because I just don't want to have to deal with that person right now, or, but if I don't go, then that makes me look bad. It makes me look like I'm not, I don't care about the family, or I'm trying to like stir some ish up or whatever, But then it's like, if I do go, like I'm going to be miserable the whole time. Like I'm going to be uncomfortable. And do I want to spend my holiday that way? Do I want to feel out of place?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you brought this up, but some of the reasons why people are cutting themselves off from family members can be from traumatic experience with domestic violence, abuse, neglect. Some link it to parental behavior, such as repetitive explosive outbursts or intense marital conflicts and disagreements, differing values and beliefs, disappointment or major life events and change, or poor communication. I would say that just from personally witnessing this in my extended family, I had a cousin who was slowly increasing her therapeutic posts, and she was talking about drawing boundaries and kind of struggling with the fact that she didn't feel supported by her family. And you would hear through the grapevine that she stopped talking to her mom. And it was during a time of stress for her, but she set the boundary of, I don't want to have anything to deal with my mom unless there's a therapist present. Like, I need to be able to have a conversation that doesn't, revert into a harmful conversation. So I don't know if you've had to deal with clients like that, or I know you haven't heard of estrangement, but what has been your experience as a therapist with that?
Oh yeah. So like I said, I hadn't heard it labeled that way, but
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Like a lot of my clients struggle with, family estrangements, and they obviously, like what we talked about earlier, they struggle with that whole stigma,
Mm-hmm.
or that irrational beliefs of like should, must, so I should be a good daughter. I should, call mom. I should do that, do this or do that, even though it drains the crap out of me, even though I'll walk away from those conversations feeling like I'm less than, like I'm not good enough, all of those things. And so, more recently, I have a client who we've been working extensively on, boundaries with her mom, who has borderline personality traits, because, that's traumatic in and of itself. Like every conversation you have with that person is traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And, learning to set boundaries, because, people with narcissistic personality traits and borderline personality traits, they don't give a crap about boundaries. They don't care how many times you try to, establish, maintain those boundaries. They will trample all over it. So she did grapple at a period of time of just like completely cutting her mom off, just saying, I'm done. And I sent her to like an EMDR therapist for a bit to work through some trauma stuff in person, because everything we do is telehealth. She lives in, well, I won't say that, but she doesn't live anywhere near me. So, I was like, you need some face to face, so she saw that therapist for about a couple of months, and they actually kind of put into her head, the little ditty of, maybe you should just cut your mom off, completely.
Okay.
And yeah. And, and she had friends who were like, you need to cut her off. You cut her off. And, inside of her, she's just like, I don't know that I can do that. Like, I just, as part of her values and her beliefs, it's just like, as much as I know she's hurting me, I really just can't see myself cutting her completely off. And I'm like, obviously as a therapist, I'm going to meet you where you are. If you're not ready for that, then I'm going to support you, and we're going to figure out ways to manage through that. So, we came up with a whole guideline of how to deal with her mom with borderline traits, but still, manage to maintain some semblance of a relationship with her. But I have other clients who have narcissistic parents / borderline personality trait parents who just completely cut them off. And they all just continue to maintain that they've never been happier. And that, they feel the most light and content and stable that they've ever felt in their lives.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a perfect segue to introduce our guest, Emma. We have.
Hi, Emma.
Hi, ladies.
Thank
Hi,
you,
ladies.
Emma, so much for joining this show
You're
and
welcome.
podcast.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So really, I thought of you when we were looking at this topic, because I know that there are values that you hold dear about family and taking care. And then how do you reconcile that with taking care of yourself and taking care of your daughter? So
Yeah. So just the point of Doris, her client having like a narcissistic / borderline personality mother, just being in therapy, with my therapist, not actually ever meeting my mom, but that's how she would have like diagnosed my mom, right? Both of those things. And to that point, my mom was very much trampled all over my boundaries whenever I did have the courage to actually put them in place as an adult, because as a child, it was like I had no rights. She did the best for me, and I'm just going to listen to her no matter how destructive her behavior was. And so just being an adult, first of all, being an immigrant to this country, a lot of things were kind of divided for us. Like just this whole estrangement thing that I'm doing with essentially towards my entire family, right? I have been outcasted and, and like basically labeled like this is such an American thing. Like it is so foreign to them. Like you're basically supposed to accept all the abuse because we owe our parents our lives, our upbringing, where we are in the world, and like for the rest of our adult lives, it's supposed to serve our parents. That's like in my culture, and so they brought us here to give us like a better life. And I say us, meaning my generation of like my cousins and I, since I don't have any siblings, but my parents, fought to bring us here, and it was such a long process. But then once we got here as very impressionable adolescents, it was met with so much resistance. Like, you can't act like American kids, like the whole independence thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was beat down physically, mentally, and emotionally. Like I could not be my own person. I could not want privacy, because my mom was going to invade every part of that. Like I have told Jennifer that I think at some point I stopped journaling, which gave me so much, it was an outlet, as probably it is for everyone. But my mom would purposely go through my stuff to read, my diaries and my journals. She was so sneaky about it. I would never know because she would save it for an explosive fight we would have and then throw it in my face. Like, I know you did this, and then label me whatever name, she felt was appropriate. And it's like, it was so shocking to me. And she kind of, got me off kilter and off balance. And so it's like all these things with my mom that I would take in, and I would make excuses like, well, it is my mom, right? Like maybe she's just trying to toughen me up, or I, and I thought everyone was going through it. Like everyone must have this kind of mom, but mine is just a little, more intense than others. And it wasn't until I got older and like meeting more friends and sharing more of myself and my home life where I started to hear like, no, Emma, this is not normal. Like you need to leave. Like if you want things to change, you need to leave. And I would just resist that so much.
I also want to add that you had shared that your mom suffered from addiction as well.
Oh yeah.
And that's an important piece where the entire family system expected you to support and enable
Yes. To
your
this
mom's
day.
addictions. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like my mom's addiction was such a taboo, and almost like, well, she's been like this since we were young. For any time I question my aunt, her sisters, like, how long has my mom had this addiction, which is gambling? Like, when did she start? And the answer is always, it started so early they couldn't even remember. Like, there was no light switch. Like, oh, well, when she turned 18 was when, the first time she started gambling. Like, no one has any recollection when it started. And as a gambler, of course, like she would always lose money. And so that became a burden, right? Like she was frivolously irresponsible with money, but everyone came to her aid, when she was in the hole. And once I became of age, I became yet another source of income for my mom. And I think her siblings kind of felt the same way and backed off because now she can rely on me and stop relying on them, sort of thing.
When do you think you
And
started setting boundaries or trying to set boundaries with family?
it's so recent. I'm embarrassed to say it was recent. It took many decades, many years of, being in that fog. It was just, I think 2 years ago was when I really put my foot down finally and started the estrangement.
Emma, like, can I just say, please, I know it's easier said than done, but please don't feel embarrassed for that, because at the end of the day, you decided and you took that leap and said, I'm going to start setting boundaries, which is one of the most difficult things to do, especially with family. Like, because they don't, people don't want boundaries. They don't want you to set them. They don't want to hear it. And it's hard within yourself because you're trying to grapple with your own values and beliefs and what you were told when you were growing up. It's like,
yes,
for family, or especially parents, it's like boundaries are disrespectful.
yes,
So it's like trying to wrap your mind around the fact that this is not me being disrespectful. This is me actually helping to have a healthier relationship with these family members by putting boundaries, setting boundaries. But I do want to ask you, Emma, like, as you're talking, the thing that kept popping into my head was, me wondering what type of effect all of this had on your sense of self-worth.
Oh, well, I was just gonna mention that, when I was when Jennifer asked me to be part of this, all these scenarios were kind of running through my mind this morning, and that in particular, stood out to me because I started thinking, I would bend over backwards for everyone in my family, meaning like my mom, my stepdad, right? And then it bled into my extended family who had so much expectations of me, but not necessarily high expectations, meaning like it wasn't the sort of like, we expect you to go to college and, be a scholar and have this high paying job. It was like the expectation was to really go. I feel it's, definitely affected my self worth. I recognize now even more how much or how little self worth I have, I should say. It shows up, I think, even, in the most minute level, it shows up daily where I push myself to the limit, even though I'm exhausted. You know what I mean? Like, and I know my daughter is different, right? Because to me, she's my number one, responsibility. But even with her, I will be uncomfortable as long as she's comfortable. And my example for that is I've heard, a couple of friends of mine who are very like work oriented and like career oriented. They're not really motherly, and they both have said to me like, I was here before my kids got here, and I'm not going to be uncomfortable for them. Like, they're going to go to bed when I'm done with my friends or I'm done doing this. Like, I'm not going to be inconvenienced by them, meaning like, if they have to be, if like they have some sort of nap time, and, the mom has like, an engagement to go to or like plans to go to, like they will wake their kids up because, you know, again, they repeat this phrase, I am not going to be inconvenienced by my kids, right? Versus when I had my daughter, um, everything revolved around like during nap times, essentially, I would be unavailable because, my daughter has like, she doesn't like sleep. So I could put her down for a nap was like golden to me. And it was also my opportunity to catch up on sleep. So, like, in that sense, my life definitely changed, and I catered to her, but it was similar to how I would cater to everyone around me, right? And I think it also showed up with choosing my partners, like the boyfriends I've had over the years have always like not been good to me, even my daughter's father, you know, whereas like I would always put himself first to my own detriment, right? And um, he is very much like my mom, like manipulated, me for some sort of gain while telling me I'm the most important thing to them, And so um, I constantly feel like on a daily basis, I'm working on making choices where, you know, I put my importance in the forefront because it is so unnatural to me, you know, like um
Mm-hmm.
like my self-worth, like the one phrase I hear everyone tell me is I'm so hard on myself. And every time I hear that, I'm like, what are you talking about? I suck at this. And they're like, no, you really don't, and it's so unbelievable to me whenever anyone has any sort of like compliment towards me or are complimentary towards me because I feel like I got picked apart in every sense. Like, I don't know, like even I feel like even my excuse me, my extended family like picked apart my physical appearance. Like my nose is too small for my face, or I was always like the cousin who was overweight and they would compare my thighs to like a pig's thighs, you know. So when I look at myself in the mirror, I really feel like I have body dysmorphia. However skinny I've gotten, like especially in my younger years, like I would see this inanimate figure in the mirror, right? Because my elders were picking me apart and I'm like that must be how I look to others, you know? And I just think it has been a collective effort, it, a collective natural effort to, I don't know, like to put me down. I have been like the target of my family, like my family and my extended family for years. And I think that's why um, the more I create distance, like more peaceful I feel, but it's also lonely because I'm the only one who's doing this, but I'm the only one who got treated this way, you know? Um, so it is very foreign to me because I constantly like feel I feel bad. I feel like because they don't want to understand. So yeah, I feel like my family, collectively, I don't know if they all got together at some point and said, we're going to pick, right? But like, they just collectively would just pick me apart physically, I mean, yeah, I mean, they would pick apart my physical appearance, right? Like, like right where my mom leaves off, as if my mom hadn't touched every part of me, like physically, mentally, and emotionally. Like she hadn't, as if she hadn't done a good enough job of tearing me down. Her sisters would basically jump in and say, like, my nose is too small for my face. And they would say it like with a laugh, right? So I would internalize that as they're laughing at me, and so whenever I would gain weight, I would zone in on my face in the mirror and say, I know I'm getting fat because my nose is starting to be, so much smaller relative to my face. Like my aunt was right, you know. And then even at a very young age, like they would compare my thighs to an appearance of how pigs' thighs look. Like, oh, look at Emma's thighs. Like, they look just like pigs, right? Like, isn't it so big? And like they would go into detail about it. So, like all these things, I just can't imagine ever repeating to my daughter ever, and um, I don't, and like part of my psyche is like trying to make sense of it. Like, why did they do this? Like, why, you know, the, chance that I may sound like I'm like playing a victim, which I'm not, but I just feel like, why was I the one that they would like torment like this? But, I don't know if it's because I am the complete opposite of my mom. Like, my mom is so fiery and such a strong personality person, and I am like shy, or like I, I always feel intimidated by others, right? Like I get scared to even speak up for myself. Like the act of speaking up for myself, I am internally like coaching myself to say something, while my heart is racing. And and like socially and like household wise, I was the only child, and the only one who didn't have a dad. My dad left at an early age, and I really honestly don't know why my family zeroed in on me. And to this day, they would still like say stuff like um when I when I earned my degree, I my daughter was 10 years old, right? When I earned it, I had been working full time this entire time. I was going to school at night, and it gave me like a sense of accomplishment, and like, wow, I really set out to do this and I did it, and I couldn't believe it myself, and so many things were changing in my life at that point, and I finally moved out and got like a small little 2-bedroom apartment. And all my cousins who have been like my supporters, were so proud of me, and they were vocal about it. And I heard my aunt say, well, we're going to visit your mom, you know, which is, she's down the street from me. And she had a stroke, unfortunately, a few years ago. And she's been living in this nursing home. And so her sisters, come to visit once in a while. And my aunt said, well, we're going to come visit your mom, but we're not going to stay with you because I'm sure your apartment is so small. It's not going to fit us. Like, I, I really, this happened like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And to this day, I think I still think like, why did she have to say it that way? Like, yes, my place is small, but like, I understand
Oh,
they're older and possibly like, they don't want to be inconvenienced, right? Like my cousins didn't care if they were sleeping on the floor. Like I remember when I first moved into my first apartment, like I had no furniture, and I was like constantly apologizing to my cousins, like, well, if you guys come stay with me, I have nothing. And they're like, we don't care. We're there for you, you know? And,
mm,
like just to hear this particular aunt of mine, like constantly put me down. And, and I don't know if I'm correct because I'm only assuming because I could never even get a straight answer from them, even if I wanted to. Sometimes, when I allow myself, to think these thoughts and try to justify it, like, why does she in particular? Why does she, like, she's so hot and cold with me? Like, she loves me, but I feel like she's a hater, you know? Which, by the way, this is how I feel my mom also feels about me. She loves me, but she's also my biggest hater. And this particular act of mine, I feel, has always put me and her daughter in competition with one another. And her daughter is only 6 months younger than me. And she was my closest cousin growing up. Like, she didn't care about the comparison, but I did because I naturally always felt inferior to her. Always because, I was brought up basically being told I was
With those
worthless.
feelings,
Yeah,
with those feelings of worthlessness, did you feel like you were constantly apologizing for yourself?
oh yeah, oh yeah. Like me apologizing about myself and me apologizing in general comes so naturally to me. Like, I say sorry almost like that is part of my natural vocabulary on a daily basis. Like, and when I say I'm sorry, I don't think anyone understands like the shame I feel internally when I say it, because that's how much I mean it. Like, I'm sorry
Mm,
I inconvenienced you. Like waiting for me for 10 minutes to hop onto this podcast.
mm,
Like I the dread I felt, like
mhm,
knowing I was 10 minutes late because I told Jennifer like this time was a good time, and like how dare I not show up when I said, you know, I would be available like constantly. And I do feel like I don't know who I am. Like my identity has been such a mystery to me. Like,
mm,
I'm a single mom. I never really dated after having my daughter because I feel like dating is finding a new job, right? And
Oh my gosh, yes.
and my constant fear is those two things, a job interview and dating someone. You have to put your best foot forward and try to, talk yourself up. But how could I
mm.
possibly do that when I don't know how to do that in the first place? Like I never have anything nice to say about myself. In fact, I almost frame it like in an apologetic way, you know, like like I'm super emotional. I'm sorry, I'm crying right now. It's embarrassing for me, but like I understand that it's probably, you know, um, a good thing because I'm so vulnerable, but like I
And
wish
it's a
I
good thing
didn't.
because it's cathartic and it's healing. Like as you're talking
Yeah,
about this, every single time you talk about this is healing because what you have experienced is traumatic. It is a trauma. Everything that has been perpetuated onto you is traumatic, is a trauma. And I hear you when you say like, I don't want to be, I don't want to be a victim or act like a victim, but it's not even like, it's so many times like we're like, oh, am I exaggerating? Am I
right.
overthinking this? Absolutely not. What
Yeah,
happened to you is traumatic. What you've gone through, and I'm not sure if you're in therapy or not, but when you go into therapy, you start to realize that everything that you're experiencing is absolutely valid, is absolutely real and true. You're not
Thank you.
conjuring anything in your head. All of this is your experience. And from what I'm also getting from you is not only is your sense of self-worth just ravaged and destroyed by your family, but because it was so intertwined in your family, that also adds to you just feeling like, I don't know who I am.
Yes.
I don't know what I am.
Right.
And so, when you talk about family estrangement, so many people, when they do decide to walk away, they also start to learn and feel a sense of identity, self-identity, sense of self-worth, because they start to figure out who they are outside of the family, outside of the comments and them telling you who you are and what you are.
Right. And I agree to some extent. No, I wholeheartedly agree. Actually, I think just intertwined with that is um, my low self esteem kind of hinders that growth process because it's been like decades at this point, that it's been kind of drilled in my mind. Like, my mom would use the words, I'm worthless. Like, like that word has such a big impact on me because my own mother would say, like, literally tell me to my face, you are so worthless. You know, she would say in anger, but like, I would never say that to my daughter in anger because I know what that did to me, mentally. That like anything I do, I almost have to remind myself. It's almost like even though I'm older, I feel like a young adult. Like an 18-year-old kind of navigating their way through adult life and learning. And so that kind of messes with me mentally because I'm like, here I am at my age, but having to learn what everyone else learned 20 years ago, you know? And so like I constantly have to tell myself like it's okay, even though I do feel behind everyone else, like my peers. I feel behind um, emotionally and like socially,
Mm-hmm.
status wise. I feel 20 years behind, but I guess like, um, it's never too late. Like all I can do is move forward from here and like, try my best because I can't ever get that time back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like just recognizing that words matter. Like when enough people tell you enough times like that you're nothing or like you're worthless, you start to believe that. Like you start to think like, they're right. And I know that factored into why I stayed in my parents' home for so long because my mom would always tell me, right, go out there into the world, go and you can see for yourself how harsh the world is. You're never going to make it out there, never, you know. So no one is going to love you like I love you because I'm your mother and I'm telling you the truth, but you're not going to make it out there. And so she would it was just abuse in every form that I suffered at the hands of my mother. Like I always say mentally, physically, and emotionally, my mom abused me. She would tell me she loved me in the same breath. She would tell me I was worthless and that I would never make it out there. And I really believe that. Anytime I thought about moving out, I would always think like, well, my mom said I couldn't do it. Like, so maybe she's right. Like
she couldn't do it on her own, and she had to, be in a relationship with my stepdad for her to finally have like a stable home for herself. So maybe she's right. But like I didn't take into account her own vices, like her addiction. Like I think my mom did such a great job deflecting her own um, shortcomings that I never saw it. I never see other people's flaws because I'm so busy focusing on my own. Like no one can ever put me down any more than what I do to myself because that's how I've been conditioned. You know, like like I will call myself ugly or like bad at school or like, bad at cooking or not knowing to set a budget. Like I will call all these things out before anyone can even bring it up. And what I find out when I do this is no one's even thinking about me in that way. Like no one's gonna tell me like you're so bad at this, Emma. Like, why do you even wake up each day and try? But these are like the dialogues that go through my mind on a daily basis that I fight on a daily basis. Like it's okay if you mess up. It's not as devastating. No one is going to throw in your face what you did, 2 years ago by accident, right? The way my mom has done it. Like to this day, I will have a conversation with my mom and she will say, "Remember when you were a teenager and like, you know, we got into this fight and you were so completely out of bounds disrespectful to me? Remember that?" She'll bring up stuff that happened when we were still in the Philippines that I'm like, even if I wanted to forget it, I guess, she will serve as a constant reminder of how she felt I wasn't good enough. And for whatever reason, like it makes her feel better that she constantly reminds me of like all my shortcomings. And, now that I'm older, I recognize like maybe she does that to deflect from her own. Like because she's never had to face her own shortcomings. Like it's easier to blame someone else, and unfortunately for me, I learned all of these things from her. Like, I always feel like my parents clipped my wings, like, to sound at the
Yeah.
risk of sounding corny, I feel like I was this flower that they didn't allow to bloom. Like for some reason, they just did not want to see
Yeah.
me flourish because it gave my mom so much satisfaction to say, "You are unsuccessful because you were so disrespectful to me." She said this to me yesterday, actually. You know, she said this to me just yesterday while on the phone with me and my daughter. And she's telling my daughter, don't basically don't be like your mother because nothing good will ever come to you, you know?
It's
And
That's heartbreaking to hear, especially when your daughter is being pulled into this family narrative of who you are.
you were
Um,
pulled in
and yet
everyone has
I hear one thing that stuck out to me is that you are taking steps to reparent yourself, and that despite all of this, there are times when you're encouraging yourself and talking to yourself the way you wish your mom had talked to you.
yes. And even though it is so uncomfortable, like it is
Mm.
so uncomfortable for me to do that, I do because I want to be like I said earlier, I want to be the parent to my daughter that I feel I should have. But I guess I'm also, as you said, like also reparenting myself in the process.
How has that been going? I think you said earlier it's been the past couple of years. What have you noticed, or have you noticed any differences as you've been setting boundaries or not being as available as you were in the past? I know you said you moved out. What have you noticed with that?
Deal with constant feeling of guilt. Like, am I doing the right thing? Like, even though, I have the peace of mind. Like every day I come home, I'm very grateful for the peace of mind that I have my own space and creating my environment to be like what I want. Like when I want it to be quiet, no TVs are on and no one is bothering me, you know. But I constantly deal with the guilt of like I ask myself this question: why am I doing it? And in the bigger sense, it's all the things that I've talked about, right? Like boundaries, because they haven't been good to me, but the guilt comes from, yeah, they haven't been good to me, but they were good to me. They provided shelter. They provided food. Like I had a home to go home to, but it was chaotic, but it was still a home. You know, and I think the frailty of my parents also um make me feel very guilty because you know I feel like they're pretty much at the end of their lives. Like, how much will I regret this separation? Like like sometimes I think, why can't you just stomach like an hour each with them? But sometimes 1 hour is so dreadful that I can't even bring myself to do it, you know? And so even though I've distanced myself from them, the narrative has now changed to Emma is, such an ungrateful daughter that she doesn't even visit her own parents. Like that's how much of a POS person I am. Like no one really cares about how I feel. And that's apparent. That's been established, but like no one really cares, why I feel the way I feel. And also my cousins, who are like my biggest supporters, don't even though they offer the support and tell me like, oh, just ignore them, or we all have your back. They don't really understand because my aunts and like my mom still treat them differently. My mom still compares me to my cousins. Like, oh, they're so successful because um they're good daughters. They listened to their parents. They weren't disrespectful, unlike you who always talk back, you know? So I think I struggle with, I've created so much distance that I don't know how I could ever go back. And I want to create more. Like, I kind of want to disappear from their lives, but that would mean completely cutting everyone off. And it's so foreign to me. Like it breaks, it even breaks my heart, even though, you know, they've been nothing but negative to me. It's just so heartbreaking to think about, like, if I cut them all off, I feel like I can do it. I just don't know how that would affect me emotionally in the long run, you know?
That leads me to a question for our in-studio therapist. Yay, I'm glad I can make people laugh with such a heavy subject. How, like, with this situation, how would you proceed with the client? I know that you touched upon this at the beginning of the episode, but I hear with Emma that there's, it's heartbreaking to cut off her whole family, but how can you create healing and space, which is a priority for her, while also maintaining some sense of connection? How does that look? What does that look like? What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I'll say this, like I said earlier, is like, I try to meet the client where they are because, obviously as therapists, we're not here to give advice. We're just here to support you in whatever decision you decide to make. And for you, Emma, it sounds like, you decided to distance yourself. You realize, and I will say this as an aside, because I was just thinking about this when you were talking, you're talking about being a mom. And, more times than not, when we become a parent, it opens our eyes up even more so to the fact that, look at me. I'm supportive, I'm loving, and it comes easy, and I'm empathetic. Why couldn't I have that? What was so difficult that, I didn't deserve, or I wasn't good enough to get, so it opens our eyes to realize that they were highly capable of this, and they chose to do, to treat me in this way. They chose, and then also you're left with the whole idea of wanting to protect your child from it. Number one, obviously, you don't want the family perpetuating anything that they, perpetuated onto you, onto your child.
Yeah.
So you feel like you have another duty when it comes to distancing yourself of protecting your child, right?
Yes.
So as far as what you were saying, what you were asking, Jennifer, about the healing, you have to decide for yourself, how you're is it going to be 100%, no contact across the board? And if so, what's that going to look like for me? And can I manage it emotionally? Because we have to be realistic with ourselves. We can't make a choice and then say, well, I'm going to waver on it on this instance or that instance because, I don't want to miss the wedding, or I don't want to, not be a part of this. When we make a decision, we have to, that's just like with our boundaries. We can't waver. We have to stick to it and realize that in the end, it's the healthiest thing for us.
Yes.
Now, I'm not sure what you mean by cutting off your entire family, but
my aunts, I'm close with my aunts and uncles' kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a problem with my aunts and uncles still having me as part of their conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing about how I'm at my cousin's house, and they'll hear about that, and the narrative is, if Emma can make it to her cousin's house, who doesn't live close to her, like most of my family lives in Vegas, the closest one is in San Diego. How did she make it to her cousin's house but can't visit her own mother? So that's been the narrative, right? So I feel like in order for me to be like a ghost to my family, I would have to cut off my cousins as well, which I'm not ready to do because they're my siblings, they're the closest things to siblings I'd ever have,
That's not fair to you. It's not fair to them, and it's not fair to you. So that's what I mean about when we make a decision, we have to stick by it. And within that, maintaining our boundaries and advocating for ourselves and using assertive communication. Just because they're chattering behind your back saying, well, she has time for blah, blah, you're absolutely right. I did have time. I had time for people who treat me with respect, who honor my boundaries, who make me feel good in their presence. And so those are the people that I choose to spend my time with. And when you show me that you can respect my boundaries, that you can treat me in a way in which, I walk away feeling good, then by all means, I have no problem being in your presence. But there's nothing wrong with you advocating for yourself, for you using assertive communication with them, because yes, they will talk. They will say, well, Emma came over your house. I haven't seen Emma in like months. Okay.
Right, right.
Like, and it's nothing wrong also with being honest, saying, look, like I'm going to move ahead with my life. I'm going to spend time with the people that, I enjoy spending time with. Unfortunately, that's not going to include you for now because this, that, and the other. And you can outline it. And that is healing in and of itself, because you're letting them know specifically what they've done to hurt you and why you're choosing, to now put boundaries in place. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that, I know there's the feelings of guilt, there's a feeling, because again, a lot of this has been ingrained in you culturally, just, family dynamics, that you're supposed to be there. Family can treat you however they want to treat you,
Right,
but you definitely have to be there. And that's not okay. That's not the life you want to live. And that's not what you want to model for your child.
right.
And it's okay to say that. And it's okay and when I say that, I'm kind of giving you more self-talk to, talk to yourself and remind yourself that what I'm doing is the healthiest for me and my child.
Okay.
And even maybe practicing saying that to your cousins too. Making that spread from self-talk to letting your cousins know what your choice is.
Got it. Yeah, which I do, and they've been understanding to, to an extent. I've just become like, you know, the family scapegoat. Like I don't even know if we have time, for me to share just like, I guess just a brand off of, my aunt one of my aunts who is like the most vocal, like she campaigns the entire family to be against me. She texts my cousins and like, you know, serves fire and vitriol, when talking about me. She calls her siblings to talk about me. Like that's how far her campaign goes. And I know it's because she's older and like has nothing better to do with her time that she has all this energy towards me. But come to find out, well, which I've known, right? Like her own kids are serving their own, I guess, level of estrangement from her, but in a way that, they only call her for childcare, basically is the narrative that my aunt feels, which I think I agree with. Like they don't really regard their mom as someone, of importance to their life unless they need her for something, and it's quite apparent. But my aunt, who was staunchly protective of her kids, will never utter a bad word about them publicly. So she projects that anger she has for them towards me because my mom vents to my aunt. Coincidentally, like they are the biggest enemies, but also the best of friends, my mom and this particular aunt. So I think they share their, similarities of, oh, like my kids are ungrateful, they don't spend enough time with me. But my aunt chooses to magnify my mom's grievances because my mom is in a nursing home, and it takes the light off of her own children. And this aunt of mine got into an explosive fight with one of her kids, one of my cousins, and decided to go to the Philippines, right? Because she's like, I've had enough, like they're so ungrateful. I'm going to teach them.
sort of thing. And another cousin of mine who my aunt has been sort of like venting to ended up telling me, and I'm close to this cousin who, once again, she always offers support. Like, she always tells me to just ignore my aunt, even though I tell her, like, I'm like, I know she's projecting because her kids can't stand her, kind of thing. So she's always said that she supports me, but it wasn't until my aunt decided to, fly her rage into, a flight to the Philippines, as some sort of like strike against her own kids. It was that cousin who eventually texted me and was like, "You're right. She is projecting. You're right. You've been right this whole time. She's projecting how much, her kids hate her and she like takes it out on you." And it was almost like it kind of hurt my feelings because I'm like, this is what I've been telling you guys this entire time. Like, she harasses me all the time, but I think it's this pent up anger she has for her kids. But like, up until my cousin saw that for herself, I don't think she really believed it, and I don't know if you can speak to that in particular, where I feel like I'm not really heard because they don't really understand. Like, yes, they offer their support, but I think they think I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they think I'm exaggerating. I think they really didn't understand the the level of like um what's the word am I looking for? Just like my aunt projecting her anger onto me, and keeping the focus on me and my mom. Therefore, her kids are still like these like amazing individuals to the family who are like wildly successful and like untouchable because she's so her first like her priority is the appearance, for appearance's sake. There you go. Like, for appearance's sake.
What I was getting from what you were just saying is that your cousins have been there and have been a rock and a support, but yet still there's been a frustration where your role in the family has been one where they don't believe you. And it's not until recently that maybe one has been like, oh, maybe you were right. Okay. And so I guess my question is, how do you have this relationship? And maybe you can speak to this from a therapeutic perspective. You're in this family system that's extensive. And how do you distance yourself from others and yet exist still as a part of a smaller family system within and change the narrative? Is it even possible? Can you change your role in a family system where they've kind of seen you in a certain way?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, like, as long as they're not seeing you or, perpetuating their own, like, belief of who you are onto you, like, it doesn't, like, at the end of the day, there are things we can control and things we really just can't. And in this situation, like, what you're saying concerning, like, they don't really they believe you, but don't believe you, like 100%. And that's human nature because, they haven't experienced it. And it's like, until you've experienced it or even maybe witnessed it, it's hard for you to really wrap your head around. because it's hard for people to believe or to think that a parent would be so cruel to their own child, that would perpetuate so much trauma onto their own child. And, when they have this view in their head about that person, and it's corroborated, it's like, well, part of them doesn't even want to believe what you're saying, because that would mean that they themselves may have to change their relationship with that person. So they would rather just be, a little bit more ignorant. But when you talk about your cousins, if you truly feel like, my cousins are supportive, they're people I want to keep in my life, then absolutely, why not? As long as whatever their beliefs are don't hurt you and, or affect you in a negative way, because again, they're human. It's hard for them to put themselves in your shoes because they've never experienced it. And again, I hate to keep using the word trauma, but trauma is very subjective. Something that is traumatic for one person may not be traumatic for another person. And so we have to just kind of, realize this is where I am. This may not be where this person is, or, they may not fully understand what I've experienced and what, I'm going through, which is also super helpful in having a therapist, because you can talk to the therapist. It's not a shameful plug, but it's kind of a shameful plug with therapy. But, you finally have someone in your life that fully understands, fully validates, fully empathizes. Because, again, family members, friends, they can only meet you, where you are and do so much. They just, it's hard for them to step outside of themselves and fully see and fully understand. But I will say this, and kind of just to kind of wrap it up, because I know we're kind of over time, but as far as like family estrangement goes, it sounds like where you're concerned, you actually really truly, are at that place where you've decided to distance yourself from the people that are, destroying your self-worth, that are perpetuating trauma towards you, and in the sense of like verbal abuse, right? Trying to tear down who you are as a person, and also in an effort to like protect your child from it. But at the same time, you're starting to realize I don't have to cut everybody out of my life. Like, I can advocate for myself. I can, communicate. I can be honest and still keep my cousins in my life whom I really do actually enjoy spending time with. Is that accurate? Did you have anything you wanted to add, Jennifer, before?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I guess resources, therapy is a great resource. It's not a shameful plug. But if not a therapist, even, neutral, try to find neutral parties. There's the, what is the name of it? Dude, did I lose it? The Cornell Family Reconciliation Project, where it gives resources, but also shares a vast variety of people that have experienced estrangement, and people who have experienced reconciliation, but also talking about boundaries being set. And I think with Emma's case, like, estrangement is appropriate with people that continue to not take responsibility for their actions and have no interest whatsoever in changing how they respond to you. And so for health and safety, of course, that's appropriate, but not, again, everybody has different examples. So really consider it's a personal decision. And as our therapist said here, it's a personal decision, but also getting help, talking about it. What else? Accepting that some people aren't going to change, and not being able to control that aspect. Being able to show up however you can with the family that you have is important. But making sure that you hold on to the values that are important for you and your daughter, or whoever it could be. your family is important. Anything else? Is there anything else that we're leaving out?
I feel like you summed it up perfectly. Like, resources, absolutely. And, I didn't touch on that, but you're absolutely right, because with family estrangement, we do we're quiet, we keep it to ourselves because we feel like people aren't going to understand. What? You're not talking to your family? Like, what? Oh, you too good for, you know what I mean? Like, it's, so you just keep it to yourself. So absolutely what you mentioned, Jennifer, about talking to, or finding groups of people that have experienced it too, who are right where you are, can be super beneficial too. But therapy, therapy is helpful just across the board. So we'll end it there. I hope that you two have a great rest of your day together, and I will speak to you soon. Take care of you.
Thank you so much.
Be kind to yourself. Just want to throw that out there. Be kind to yourself. Be patient with yourself. Okay. All right. We'll wrap it up there. Bye.
Take care.